Stop. Go to 7. 8. 9.
Lately, we've been talking more and more about massive Hollywood blockbusters that were mediocre at best and ultimately ended up losing a bunch of money. But for today, I thought it'd be interesting to look at the same topic but from the exact opposite side of the fence, as in a massive Hollywood blockbuster that was genuinely incredible and still ended up losing a bunch of money, or as it's also called, Blade Runner 2049. Now, before you justifiably run up and assassinate me for the title of the video, I just want to make something clear. I personally do think this film is an astounding cinematic achievement. The atmosphere of its world is incredibly captivating and something we frankly never see anymore. The narrative directions it takes are freshly unconventional. The visual appearance of it alone makes it the best looking cinematic ride since Macbeth. All in all, I'd say we are very fortunate to have had the chance to see this film. But that said...
Stop.
As much as it would be nice to ignore, the fact is that Blade Runner 2049 did become another big Hollywood flop. It didn't become the biggest flop of all time, but it did become enough of a flop for the industry to say that, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do this again. Except for maybe one single pocket of people who are either immensely brave or just downright crazy. And obviously this begs the question, if a movie is heralded as an astounding cinematic achievement by those who saw it, why didn't more people see it? Well, the answer is fairly simple. It demands a lot from the audience. And with most general audiences who aren't part of this online cinephile culture bubble, it demanded too much. See, usually these big blockbusters are movies like Infinity War, for example, that you can just throw up on screen and be instantly along for the ride. But Blade Runner doesn't really work that way. You can't just throw Blade Runner up on screen like that. With Blade Runner, you have to make a conscious, premeditated decision to prepare and plan to watch it, to be truly able to latch on to what it offers. If most blockbusters are pork chops that you can have ready in 2 minutes, Blade Runner 2049 is a frozen turkey that you need to melt and marinate for a full day before consuming. And most moviegoers today aren't prepared or even incentivized to choose the latter. And so for today, I thought it'd be interesting to find out why that is. What exactly Blade Runner 2049 does that makes it demand a price that most audiences aren't willing to pay. What it does to become an incredible, fantastic film, but only for those chosen few who are prepared to play by its very strict and very taxing rules. The first core issue with 2049 when it comes to attracting general audiences is that it's basically a combination of two defining factors that are always a danger at the box office. It's very long and it's very slow. And that's not a matter of personal preference, that's a fact. If you won't take it from me, maybe you will from this other guy who produced and wrote on the movie.
It was a wonderful movie, but it didn't perform to its expectations. No. What do you attribute that to personally in looking at it?
Bit slow. Long. Too long. I'd have taken that half an hour.
The argument of this film being long is explained right there in the IMDb details. But as for why it's slow, there's a couple different conclusions you can make to explain it. The obvious thing you can say is that, yeah, it plays out very slow. They hold shots way longer than most movies today to give you time to really take in this impressive world. They give actors way more time and freedom to convey emotion. And as great as all that can be, it also leads to the not so great result where it takes this movie way longer than usual to make progress in whatever it's doing, and overall makes many viewers feel like they're watching a movie at 50% speed.
Trying to provoke him.
It's a good one.
Some questions.
Like what?
But that said, I don't think long shots and long scenes and a long runtime are a problem in of themselves. If stuff is consistently happening in an engaging way, we humans tend to lose track of time anyway. So the real problem behind this movie being so slow, I'd argue, is that for most of that lengthy runtime, nothing really happens. There's no conflict being presented in these long shots. There's no obstacles being overcome in these long scenes. Overall, there's usually nothing in this long film that would make us be engaged unless we had already chosen to do so ourselves. For example, there's a 7-minute sequence where our hero Kay goes to Wallace archives to find information on this one deceased replicant, and there's no conflict or obstacles or problems during this 7 minutes whatsoever. It's not like he's denied access to what he needs and so he has to force or persuade or trick his way through the resistance to get to it. No, he just walks up to the main desk and then he gets nicely escorted and shown around the place to get to the very thing he came for. When Kay goes to meet this girl for information, it's not like the girl doesn't want to give it up and he somehow has to make her, but instead she just gladly obeys. When Kay returns to Sapper's house to look for a missing clue, it's not like there's anything special about it, but instead he just walks in through the front door, sits down on the couch, and then finds exactly what he's looking for. And even though I don't want to be too harsh here, that's not really inherently interesting. That's not really inherently engaging. That's not something that screams to the audience that things are happening. Even when at times there is conflict and obstacles and there are things happening, it's so small and subtle that often you don't even really know it's there until it's already resolved.
Can't help you. Are you coming?
You can't take those.
Of course not.
Look, there are other things you can do besides just conflict, yes. Here, for example, whenever we have scenes between Kay and Joy, they're almost always built on charged up sexual tension, which works really well and does make these scenes compelling. But most of the time, this isn't the case. Most of the time, this whole movie consists of drawn out shots and scenes of nothing but Kay just walking around and looking at things. And I truly believe that if you had just added in a stronger sense of progression through a consistent stream of conflict and obstacles being overcome, the box office result would have been much better. Because as visually striking and stretched out as you can make your tiny passing moments that in a script take only a couple seconds, that doesn't make for an inherently compelling movie, as much as it does for a beautiful looking walking simulator.
Watch the car.
The second box office related issue with this film is that it's very unconventional and against the grain when it comes to taking the audience on a satisfying adventure. In that whereas usually bigger movies always try to give the audience an experience that by the very end makes them feel at least in some ways fulfilled, Blade Runner 2049 on the other hand comes in to take everything away from the audience, which can come off as very unsatisfying. And it does this in a few different ways. First off, instead of taking storylines and characters to clear, completed conclusions, this film has a habit of just suddenly chopping those storylines and characters off without any warning whatsoever, like with Kay's holographic AI love interest Joy, for example. We spend a lot of time building up this love relationship between Kay and Joy to make it seem real, despite her not being real, and it's done very well. We actually start to care about these two. We actually want them to be together. But then all that this relationship ultimately amounts to is this.
I do hope you're satisfied with our product. I love you.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
All of a sudden, Joy gets stunned into non-existence, and that's it. She doesn't come back, she doesn't leave anything behind, there's absolutely nothing direct that her death contributes to. She's just gone, and that's it. The only time her memory is even brought back up is when it's to hammer in the point that she and her feelings for Kay were never real anyway. And to be clear, that's not bad. I thought it was great. I thought it was really powerful and a perfect highlighter of this hopeless, joyless world. But regardless of what I think or what you think, the fact is that this isn't how big movies are supposed to go. It's not very positively fulfilling. And so for general audiences who are used to seeing only the bigger commercial releases, it will come off as very weird and unsatisfying. And there's a lot of stuff like this in here, where stuff is just unceremoniously ended. We have this scene where the police captain refuses to give out Kay's location to the evil replicant and ultimately ends up giving her own life for him. But then the evil replicant just goes on her computer and finds out his location anyway, meaning that the captain's actions and death were completely for nothing. Another thing this movie does is that even if it takes things to clear overarching conclusions, those conclusions aren't in any way what we want to see. For example, throughout the runtime we've been building up our hero Kay as special. He's a manufactured replicant who then finds out that he might actually be more than that. He might be the very first replicant ever to have been born.
Your memory. The date carved beneath. 6, 10, and 21. I always knew you were special. You're special. Born.
But then,
Rachel had a daughter. You imagined it was you.
after all that build-up, it turns out that Kay isn't special after all, and that the ultimate purpose for him is to just die for the person who is special, who we've seen only in one scene and so don't really care about, as well as her relationship with her father, who we don't really care about either, unless we've seen the original 80s movie. In other words, the full central story here is for a hero to find out that he's special, only to then lose his only love in the process, and ultimately find out that he was never special in the first place, and then he just dies off without ever seeing even a hint of the future he's dying for. And if that wasn't already enough, then there's also stuff in here that isn't concluded or resolved at all. This whole time we built up this Wallace guy as the main threat to Kay's kind, but then he isn't ever dealt with. He sends Harrison Ford off to be interrogated, only to be never seen again. We never defeat him, we never see a shot of him realizing that he lost this battle, we never resolve him in any way. He just vanishes off the movie, and that's it. And this kind of unconventional approach, where no clear gratifying conclusions are given, isn't something general audiences usually find satisfying or get enjoyment from. They just don't, and that's it. Finally, there's the problem that I've been kind of hinting at before, which is the fact that whenever this film does something, it's always so subtle about it that what it does can often, for many less attentive viewers, end up feeling like nothing. Which is why if you're not constantly paying close attention, this movie overall can end up feeling like nothing. Firstly, the characters. Even though I talked about the filmmakers giving the actors more time to convey feelings and emotion, the fact is that there isn't much feelings and emotion being conveyed in here. Our hero Kay, for example, he most of the time has pretty much just one face and one tone of voice.
Scans said you didn't look like you on the inside, miles off your baseline. Do you know what that means? And it's not just Kay, it's most other non-human and human characters as well, aside from maybe a couple exceptions. In this world, characters are very subtle and reserved about projecting their emotions. And the problem with this is that we humans tend to imitate emotions. If our hero clearly feels happy, then odds are that we feel happy, and so on and so on. And on the flip side, if for most viewers it seems like the hero feels nothing, there's a good chance that they feel nothing, which isn't something you want them to feel. Secondly, the story. Like I mentioned, the ultimate intent of this movie is to ask us to care not just about our hero, but also the entire replicant race. But the potential issue is that we never really delve into what it means to be a replicant or what makes them different from humans. There's some text explanation at the beginning, but we don't really dive into it beyond that. We don't see replicants being badly mistreated in a way humans wouldn't. We don't see replicants being used for slave labor or anything. Mostly we aren't given enough to even distinguish replicants from humans. And even though that may be the point, if you ask your audience to support a certain group of people over another, you might want to make it clear to them who it is they are meant to support. This leads us to the third point, the ending. ultimate resolution here is about Kay giving his own life to reunite Deckard with his lost replicant daughter.
Beautiful, isn't it?
And as beautiful as that might be, the movie has again been perhaps a bit too subtle about the road that led us here. We've seen this girl just once before, so we don't really care about her. And even though Harrison Ford is always great,
I don't know. Ask him.
we don't really get enough from him here to care about Deckard either. And his whole backstory relationship with his dead replicant girlfriend and his daughter is left mostly on the shoulders of the 80s original, which a lot of people haven't seen and thus can't feel the full impact of, which is always the danger when the filmmakers behind a continuation are massive fanboys of the original. They tend to forget that a lot of people aren't. And the list goes on and on. The movie is very subtle about its goals and objectives and motivations, so you have to pay very close attention to even understand what is going on. Same with character dynamics, relationships, same with character interactions within scenes, like this moment between Kay and his captain, for example.
We're all just looking out for something real. What happens if I finish that?
Shouldn't I get back to work, madam?
If you didn't catch it, this moment and scene is built on sexual tension. When the captain says we're all looking for something real and then asks what happens if she finishes the bottle, what she's really saying is that she'd like to do it with Kay, which is fantastic and works great if you catch it. But again, it's so understated that most audiences aren't going to. I mean, the movie doesn't even cut to the bottle when she brings it up. I could go on, but at this point it feels like I'm going in circles. Bottom line, this is a great movie, but at the same time, I would say that in many ways it also fell victim to its own greatness. Maybe now you've heard enough to catch on to why I'm saying that, but if not, then I guess you can call me Filmento 2049.